Let's get started as more people sign in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. Here at Cafe Oleh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need in Israel to succeed, whether that's reading and paying your bills, going grocery shopping, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, interviewing, dating, getting into an argument, whatever it may be, but in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, more particularly in Israel. As always, we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. Please write us at hebrew@nbn.org.il, or if you're joining us live here on Zoom, you can type it into the chat box here in the menu below or above, depending on how your Zoom is configured. You can also find all of our previous lessons up on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh. You'll see a whole playlist of all of our previous lessons. And we are looking forward for the rest of the spring session together to go over a variety of topics. And as always, if you're joining us on Zoom Live, you can write any questions you have about this specific class in the Q&A box. Otherwise, please write in the chat if it has nothing to do with this specific class. We will send out the vocabulary list along with a recording of this class that will go on YouTube in the next day or so. So with that, let's get started. It's a busy day here in Israel. The 1st of May is also a lot of different things in Israel today, and a lot of news is being made. And if you've joined us in the past for Cafe Oleh, you know that every 4 to 6 weeks or so, we go through the news together in Hebrew, trying to understand how media sources and news sources in Israel are built. And even with the most beginner level of Hebrew, how to understand what a page of news looks like, especially online, and how to go about reading it, whether you need to look at something in depth, whether you need to use a translation service, whether you can just leave it to the side, understanding that most of English language media that's built in Israel is not necessarily for a local audience. Rather, it's from it's usually for an abroad audience. There are some exceptions, especially today, right? So today, a number of things made the news. It was the beginning of the Knesset summer session. So that was the news across all channels, regardless of language. The prices for raw milk went up, and also several dairy products went up. That also made news, thankfully, both in English and in Hebrew. So you can go, if you haven't read that, I highly suggest seeing what the price changes are. They are quite significant. We were actually originally going to talk about that today because it's quite a big news story. Thankfully, the English language media is covering it. But what we're going to cover today is something that also the English language media is covering, but it does affect us as Israelis, as Olim, as Hebrew learners. And I'm going to take you actually through a very practical guide once we go through this, which is the news about updating passport, new and renewing passports, Israeli passports in Israel. As you know, there's been quite the bottleneck for the last 2+ years in it, both because of Corona. That's how we call it, by the way, in Israel. We don't say COVID, we say Corona. And also all sorts of other mitigating factors that have led to very long appointments in getting, renewing or getting a new passport. The Misad Apnim, the Interior Ministry, has just come out with a update on that, which is what we're going to go through today. So let me first share with you what the specific news source we're going to look at looks like. Okay. So what you are looking at is the news section of Mako. Mako is an online portal. It's a large portal. Its news segment and a lot of its entertainment section is part of TV Channel 12. TV Channel 12 in Israel was originally known as Channel 2. It literally was the second channel in Israel. It was the first channel, first commercial channel in Israel. The first channel in Israel, Arutz Harishon, literally the first channel, which is now called Kan, was public broadcasting, still is to this day. Channel 12 came around at the time. Channel 2 introduced color broadcasting, introduced commercial TV, and a whole new array of made in Israel programming, some of which you're probably very familiar with around the world. This is their online news segment, their 8 o'clock news show, newscast every weekday night is one of, if not the most popularly watched news segments in Israel. The 8 o'clock news, all of the major news channels, all the major channels have their nightly news at 8 p.m. We don't have a 24-hour news channel in Hebrew. We do have in other languages, but not in Hebrew. We do have news on the hour, on TV, on radio, as well as online. So this is the channel 12 one. As you see here, how it's set up. So the menu, just like most of them, are at the top. The top stories of the day, again, the headline will be on the right-hand side because Hebrew's right to left, bigger letters. You can click on it for more information. What's unique about this website, first off, it also has an update here on the judicial reform plans of the government. I highly recommend going through this section in particular. It is really balanced, number one, and really up to date what each of the major legal proposals, law proposals for the Knesset entail. Highly recommend looking at that. What's also unique on this website, because it's the most popular news source and news show on primetime TV, that they have their own chat function on the left-hand side. So if you click where it says here, Chat HaKatavim, chat is chat, Katavim, reporters. You can either click here at the bottom. You see it's even being updated as I talk. Right? All of these things get updated. It's not just local news, it's also international. And you can either press here at the bottom, Lechol HaOdaot, or in the middle at Chat HaKatavim. And you'll see, you'll get even more updated news as it happens. As Israelis, we are addicted to news sources. So it's a really fun section to use. Okay. So with that, I'm going to take you through one of today's articles. This is how it looked when it first showed up. Don't worry, I'm going to make it easier when we go through it together and translate it together in Hebrew. But as you see, as always, big headline, subheadline, article illustrating it. Cha'od means read more. It's a very short article. We're not necessarily going to go through the whole thing. But just so that you know, I'll also send you a link to this article so you can read it on your own. Okay, so what are we looking at today? Let me stop this share and open up a much more zoomed in or somewhat more zoomed in look of the words we're going to go through today. So as always, Hebrew transliteration English is on the right. You're welcome to screenshot this. You are welcome to old school pen and paper. You will receive, if you are signed up live on Zoom, you will receive a copy of this spreadsheet, so no need to panic. If you don't know how to screenshot or you are just want to follow along, you'll get a copy of this. So as you see here, I took the headline and the subheadline, blew it up, where I actually copied it a few times so we can see it and go through it together. And we're going to go through a little bit. This is about, as it says here at the top, on the left-hand side, mashber adalkonim. Mashber is our first word on the vocab, as you see on the right. Excuse me. Mashber means crisis. Okay, it comes from the same root, the same shoresh, shin bet resh, as to break, right? Lishbor is to break. And remember that all Hebrew words have a root, a shoresh in them, 2, 3, usually 3 letters, sometimes even 4. And that dictates a lot of its meaning, in addition to how we use that root, whether it's a noun or verb or an adjective, and how it's conjugated. In this case, the word mashbel means crisis. So as we see here, okay, on the left-hand side of the screen that you're looking at now, where it says mashbel hadalkonim, okay, so mashber hadalkonim, mashber, crisis, dalkonim, dalkon in Hebrew is a passport, excuse me, darkon or darkon, depending on how you say the letter resh, means a passport, okay? Crisis of passports. So what is it talking about? passport crisis. ארבע הלשכות הגדולות בארץ יאפשרו הנפקה ללא תור לכל אורך היום. Okay, let's translate this together using the words that we have on the right-hand side and with me filling it in. ארבע הלשכות הגדולות. This is a very specific format of the words that are being done here. Sorry, I'm just checking that everyone should be able to see the chat. And again, if you have in the Q&A any questions. All right, so ארבע הלשכות הגדולות. Let's take apart these three words and then put them together. Arba, the letter 4. The number 4. The number 4. Arba, the number 4. Lishka is an office. We have two words in Hebrew for an office. One is lishka, the other is misrad. Okay, in this case, we're using the word lishka for a very particular reason. You'll see why in a second. Gdola, gdolot in this case. Gadol is big, gdolot, big, feminine, plural. We put these three words together and notice the haze and notice what is each word that is being used. Arba, halishkot, hagdolot. Okay, arba halishkot is actually considered what we call in Hebrew smichut, a compound word. Because arba halishkot hagdolot, 4 of the biggest offices. Okay, it's referring, the 4, it's not 4 offices, it's 4 of the biggest offices, right? So when you see a number followed by the article ha, which indicates the, and a noun, right? You know that it's talking about fill in the blank number of the, fill in the blank adjective. So I could say arba halishkot haktanot, 4 of the smallest offices. Okay, I could also say arba halishkot hayafot, 4 of the prettiest offices. Right, the point here is, and we've talked about superlatives in the past and comparisons in the past, this is another form that they take where you use a number, you're quantifying the number of things that you're doing, and it's referring to them as the prettier or the prettiest, in this case, the biggest of what? The offices. Okay, 4 of the offices, and we'll get into particular what that means in a second. Arba halishkot hagdolot, 4 of the biggest offices, ba'aretz, in Israel, literally in the land, meaning the land of Israel. Ya'afsheru hanpaka lelo tor lelo lechol orech hayom. Okay, Ya'afsheru is our next word, right? 4 of the biggest offices in Israel, Ya'afsheru is our next word on the right, will allow. Okay, it has the same root as efshar, the way that we know to politely ask a question, which also means possible. Okay, will allow, literally will make it possible, but will allow, will permit. Hanpaka lelo tor lelo lechol orech hayom. Hanpaka is issuance. Right? When you go to get a driver's license issued or a passport, in this case, issued, it's called hanpaka. That is the verb of issuing in a official document in Israel. In fact, it's usually, it's a security question that's often used on a lot of forms, tarikh hanpaka, the date of issuance. We've talked about this before, both in looking where to vote and some other security forms. That's a very important one. Okay, Yafshiru Hanpaka. So these 4 biggest of the 4 biggest offices in Israel will allow the issuance of passports, because that's what we're talking about. Lelo tor. Lelo tor is our next one here, right? Lelo tor. Lelo tor means without an appointment. Lelo means without. We've talked about this word a lot because you see this word a lot in modern Hebrew. Okay, lelo tor. Tor is both a line and it's also a line as in a queue, meaning an appointment. Okay, so a line as in a queue and a line as in an appointment is the word that we're talking about here. We'll call it an appointment. I know that some of the British English people among us will call it a queue. It's easier to call it an appointment, just to make it a little bit more comprehensive, but it can mean both queue and appointment without an appointment. Okay, so 4 of the biggest offices, and we'll talk about those offices in particular in Israel, Yafshiru, will allow the issuance of passports. It's implied here because that's what we're talking about. Mashber hadalkonim, lelo tor, without an appointment. Lechol orech hayom, for the entire duration of the day. Lechol orech hayom. Orech is length. Lechol orech hayom, for the full length of a day. Okay, we'll talk about the details, but again, this is the headline, right? Just like in English, just like in other languages around the world in media, the headline grabs your attention, and the deeper we go into an article, the more we understand what it's talking about. Okay, let's get to the next part here. Sorry. Great. Okay. You see here in smaller letters, and I apologize if you can't see it, you can blow it up on your screen. I just want to be sure that one screen could hold both the headline and the words that we need to go to. Okay, Lishkot ha'ochlusin is what we're talking about here, right? When we said Arba halishkot hagdolot, the 4 biggest offices in Israel, we were specifically talking about this, because again, the more we get into the article, and this is the subheadline, the more details we get. Lishkot ha'ochlusin. Lishkot ha'ochlusin can best be translated as the population registry offices. Ochlusin comes from the word ochlusia, which is population. This is the official term for the offices when you need to get a teudat zehut, your national ID, when you need to get a passport done, when you need to change your address or other things that you will do at Misrad HaPnim, at the Interior Ministry. This is usually the office you're particularly going to, Lishkat Ochlusin, the population registry. Okay, so what does it say here? Lishkot Ochlusin, and now it has 2 abbreviated names. Pay attention to these 2 names, folks, because many of you live in these 2 cities. If not, you're going to see these 2 cities abbreviated like this regularly. Okay, so now you know what you're looking at when you see the letters Yud dash Mem, or Yud Makaf Mem, as you would say in Hebrew, and Te Taf Aleph, or Taf Gilshaim Aleph. Yud Makaf Mem, or Yud dash Mem, as you see here, the first of these 2 highlighted words, underscored words, is standing for Yerushalayim. Remember, in Hebrew, whether it's written, spoken, whatever, Hebrew loves conservation of syllables, of letters, of words, and as such, when we can make a well-known word smaller by abbreviating it, we will. You will see this quite a lot in news articles. If you're watching sports, for example, and they have the names of the sports teams on the left-hand side, Yerushalayim will always be abbreviated as Yud dash Mem, Yud Makaf Mem. Okay, the first letter Yud of Yerushalayim and the last letter Mem Sofi of Yerushalayim. That's how, when you see this abbreviated like that, you know instantly it's referring to Yerushalayim. Just as the next word, you know it's comprised of 2 words, right? When you see those 2 apostrophes here between these 2 letters, you know it's there are at least 2 words involved. So it's an acronym or an abbreviation. In this case, Taf Gilshaim, which are the names of those 2 quotes, or 2 apostrophes, however you'd like to call it. Taf Aleph is short for Tel Aviv. Okay, always, when you see these 2 words, recognize them immediately. Memorize them, whatever it takes, folks. Yud dash Mem, Yerushalayim, Taf Gilshaim Aleph, Tel Aviv. Okay, so Lishkot ha'ochlusin, the offices, the population registry offices in Yerushalayim, Tel Aviv, remember there's 4 of them, because that's what the headline told us. The 2 others are Haifa u'Be'er Sheva. Okay, so 4 population offices, the biggest, as the headline told us, the 4 biggest we now know are Yerushalayim, Tel Aviv, Haifa u'Be'er Sheva. Those are also the 4 biggest cities in Israel, so that makes complete sense. What are they going to do? Yitmakdu behotzaat dalkonim achel me'emtza chodesh Mai v'ad emtza chodesh Yuni. Okay, yitmakdu is our next word. Here on the right-hand side, and underlined in our article, yitmakdu will focus. Okay, many of you have had to call a moked often. Moked has the same root as our verb here, lihit maked. Moked is a, you can think of it as a, not just a patrol, but specifically an office that specializes in something, a hotline that specializes in something. In this case, lihit maked is to focus, to specialize in something. What are these 4 offices in these 4 cities going to do? Yitmakdu, they will focus behotzaat dalkonim. They're going to focus on issuing dalkonim, passports, okay? They're going to focus specifically on that. Achel מאמצע חודש מאי ועד אמצע חודש יוני. Okay, achel. You're going to see this word again and again in modern Hebrew. This is a really important word to recognize. You're going to see it in bills. You're going to see it in the news. You're going to see it in everyday correspondence and writing. Achel can be best translated as starting from, starting or starting from. It's usually followed by the preposition mem. Achel me, starting from. Okay, so know that that's what it's talking about. Starting or starting from, and you're going to see this used in past tense, present tense, future tense. This is currently in the present tense. Achel me, starting from when? Emtza chodesh mai. Here on the left-hand side at the end of this first line of the sub heading. Achel me emtza chodesh mai, starting from emtza, the middle, chodesh, month, Mai, May. Okay, starting from mid-May, it's another way we can say this, starting from mid-May until ve'ad emtza chodesh Yuni, until the middle of June. Okay, so for 1 month, mid-May to mid-June, the 4 biggest interior ministry offices will focus on issuing passports. And then it says here, okay, you see the dot. So we're starting a new topic here, a new subtopic of the headline. Milkaz nosaf yipatach bibnei brak avur dalkonim biometrim im zimun tol rosh. Should be merosh. Okay, milkaz nosaf. Milkaz is a center. Nosaf, additional. Yipatach. Okay, yipatach, and we've talked about this before when we have covered the news, and in general, modern Hebrew always likes passive tense. When you can use passive tense in Hebrew, it prefers it. It's considered a higher level of Hebrew. And that is very much against what many of us are taught, particularly those of us who are native English speakers, that passive tense is bad or should not be used as much. In Hebrew, whether it's poetic Hebrew, literary Hebrew, in this case, media and journalism Hebrew, passive tense is always seen as good. I know this is the passive tense because I happen to know how the verbs are conjugated in Hebrew, but if this wasn't passive, it would say yiftach, will open. Instead, it's what it is talking about, a milkaz nosaf, an additional center, yipatach, an additional center will be opened. Yipatach is the future tense of the verb lehipatach, to be opened. It's related to the same verb, its active form, liftoach, to open, right? Pticha is an opening. So milkaz nosaf yipatach, a additional center, will be opened where? Bivnei Brak, in Bnei Brak, right? The city Bnei Brak. Avul, for, we're now in the middle of the second line here. Avul, dalkonim biometrim im zimun tol merosh. Avul, for, dalkonim biometrim. Dalkonim, again, passports. Biometrim, exactly as it sounds, biometric, right? Most of the world's passports now are considered biometric, excuse me, meaning that it has some additional information contained in it, usually your fingerprints. I believe that is the only way it's done here in Israel, is with fingerprints, and it's telling you, and many countries now will only accept biometric passports, more and more have. So it's saying that additional office will open in Bnei Brak for biometric passports. Im zimur tor merosh. Im, with, zimun tor merosh. Remember we talked about lelo tor, without an appointment. This is the opposite. Im zimun tor merosh. Zimun tor, with scheduling an appointment in advance. Zimun comes from the verb to schedule or summon. Tor, we talked about appointment, queue, with a C, and merosh, in advance. Even though it's written here rosh, it should be merosh, in advance. Okay, now, final part of the subheadline, and we'll move on to the next part. I'm going to actually scroll down so you can see the whole thing a little bit easier. Okay, we're at the end of the second line here, where that dot is. Be'ikvot sugiyat habotim. Okay, be'ikvot is our next word here, in the wake of. Be'ikvot is a great word, folks. When I teach Hebrew, specifically business Hebrew, I come back to this word again and again, because you'll see a lot of, workplace Hebrew starting sentences with the word be'ikvot, just like you would in English, following, or in the wake of. Two ways that you can translate be'ikvot. Okay, in the wake of. Sugiyat habotim. Sugiya is the issue of. Issue as in the topic of. Those of you who are more familiar with Jewish tradition, you can think of sugiyot or sugiya in the Talmud. That is the same word here. In modern Hebrew, it's spelled with the hey at the end. A sugiya is an issue or a topic of concern. Okay, so Be'ikvot sugiyat what? Sugiyat habotim. Sugiyat habotim is a compound word. Hebrew, we love compound words because it allows us to use one less word, shel, and it allows us to create new concepts with very few words. I know it's a compound word because the initial word sugiya ends with a taf. When sugiya and any feminine word ends with a taf, you know it's being followed by another noun, and it's setting you up for a compound word. Sugiyat habotim. Botim is just like in English, bots, right? You'll remember that several weeks ago that there was a whole issue with hundreds of thousands of appointments being made to Misrad Apnim, to the Interior Ministry, to create appointments, a toll for passports, but they were issued by bots. It basically was someone trying to scam the system by charging for appointments for the Interior Ministry, because for months, if not for a year and a half, it has been notoriously difficult to schedule an appointment. And it's saying in the wake of this issue of the bots scheduling these appointments, falsely setting these appointments, colon, so you know it's referring to someone specifically, or it's going to answer the question. Yatzifu, in quotation marks, Yatzifu et Medinat Israel betorim, v'Yisraelim lo yitztarchu liknot otam. Okay, Yatzifu et Medinat Israel betorim. Okay, Yatzifu is our next word here. Yatzifu is will flood. They will flood. Okay, they will flood is referring to the offices of the Interior Ministry, not flood as in water, although this verb is used for that. Yatzifu et Medinat Israel betorim. The Interior Ministry and these four big offices will flood Medinat Israel, the state of Israel, with torim, with appointments. Dash. Ve'Yisraelim lo yitztarchu liknot otam. And Israelis lo yitztarchu liknot otam. Yitztarchu is our last word in this part. Yitztarchu will need, right? Yitztarchu, lehitztarech is to be in need or to need something. It comes from the same root, tzadi resh chaf, as tzarich. Many of you probably know this word, tzarich, tzrichat, tzrichim, tzrichot, simply means need. This is the verb to be needed or to need something. Okay, Yatzifu et Medinat Israel betorim, that these offices will quote unquote, and that's why there's quotations here, just like we use in English, will quote unquote flood the state of Israel with appointments, and Israelis will not need to buy them. Okay? That's simply what it's saying. You never needed to buy these. It was fraudulent to buy, or at least it was conning you out of money you didn't need to pay. And by opening up these 4 offices, and we're about to see for how long, not just month-wise, but time-wise, they are going to flood the country with torim, with appointments. Okay, I'm going to move. We're only going to do the next bit because I also want to actually take you through the appointment system. I know this is a point of concern a lot that we get here at Cafe Oleh and in general. How do I schedule an appointment at fill in the blank? As a review, since we're talking about making appointments for renewing and getting a new passport, Israeli passport, I'm going to take you through that once we get through this next section that provides a little bit more details. Okay. Sar hapanim hachadash, we're in this top, the first of the 4 sentences here in this new paragraph, and it's moved to the right, and it's a little bit bigger for your convenience to read with me. Okay. Sar hapanim hachadash Moshe Arbel. Sar hapanim, the interior minister. Okay, Sar, minister, as in a governmental minister. Hapnim. We've talked about this word before, folks. It is not hapanim. Panim is face. Pnim, pnim, without a vowel, with a silent vowel between the pe and the nun, means interior. Itzuv pnim, interior design. Sar hapnim, interior minister. Okay, do not call it Sar hapanim. He's not the face minister. It is people will find it endearing, but they will know that you are fresh off the boat or the plane, as it were. Sar hapnim, or Sar hapnim, the interior minister, Echadash, the new interior minister, Moshe Arbel, his name is Moshe Arbel. Hityaches, it's our next word here, Hityaches hayom, sheni, in parentheses, lemashber hadarkonim. Okay, משבר, התייחס היום למשבר הדרכונים. התייחס means referred or related. You're going to see this verb a lot in the news. We use it all the time. להתייחס is the infinitive, and I forgot to put it here. I apologize. Just put it in. להתייחס in Hebrew letters, of course. להתייחס. Lehityaches comes from the same root as yachas, right? A relation or relationship. Yud chet samech means relation or relationship. Lehityaches, to refer or to relate to something or someone. Okay, so hityaches, he related or referred to hayom, today, and in parentheses sheni, right? It's referring to yom sheni, the 2nd day of the week, i.e. Monday. Okay, Sar hapanim hachadash, Moshe Arbel, the new interior minister, related today to what? Lemashber hadarkonim, right? Our headline, the passport crisis, right? The lack of being able to issue passports. Ubiser, כי 4 לשכות האוכלוסין הגדולות בארץ יתמקדו בהנפקת דרכונים, החל מאמצע חודש מאי. Again, just like journalism in other countries, it's going to repeat what we've already understood or gleaned from the headline and subheadline, right? This is the first paragraph of that article I showed you before. So now it's going and giving us more details the more we read and go into the article. And here's a little bit more. Although most of this we've already heard. We're going to get to some new details in a second. Biser. Biser is our next verb here. I don't like this translation. It's heralded. Biser or livaser is best translated as announcing, usually something positive, right? You're rarely going to livaser when it's something negative. When you see the verb livaser, or in this case biser because it's conjugated, or the verbal noun bisora, an announcement, it usually means something positive, and a positive announcement. So herald is sort of trying to translate it as a positive announcement. Just say announce. We have other verbs that mean announce, but this one specifically is something positive. Okay, so he's made an announcement, positive, we know that's going to be positive. Ki. And ki, remember here, means for or that, not because. We've talked about this before. Bisel ki al balishkot ha'ochlusin. And he announced that. And we've talked about this before in proper formal Hebrew. Ki doesn't always just mean because, it can also mean for or that. Okay, ubiser ki arba lishkot ha'ochlusin ha'gdolot ba'aretz, the 4 biggest population registry offices in the country. We've already had all these words before, so we can just keep on reading, right? Yitmakdu, we had that word before, we'll focus. Behanpakat dalkunim, we had those words again. Okay, now we're going a little bit faster because we don't need to, we have the context already for what we're talking about. We'll focus on issuing passports, achel me'emtza chodesh Mai, starting from the middle of the month of May. Already going a lot faster here. Okay, here are some details. מדובר בפיילוט שבמסגרתו תתאפשר כניסה ללשכות גם ללא תור עבור הנפקת דרכונים מ-7:30 בבוקר ועד 10 בערב בין 14 במאי, בין ה-14 במאי ועד 15 ביוני. Okay, let's take apart this sentence. So first off, מדובר בפיילוט. Medubar be is a great expression, folks. I hope you use it a lot or find reasons to use it. Medubar be. You'll hear this again in the news, but also in everyday conversation. Medubar is the passive form of the verb ledaber, to speak or to say. Literally, it is being spoken about. What? Pilot. When you see medubar be, it can be translated in a couple of different ways. The following, it's consisting of, or we're talking about, we in a very general sense of we. Medubar in this context, just like other passive verbs, is focusing on the object, is focusing on what we're talking about rather than who is making the announcement, right? We just made it clear that we're hearing from Sel HaPanim, from the Interior Minister. We don't need to hear his name again. We need to hear what is being offered. What's the object being offered, right? And so it gets right to it. Medubar bepilot. We're talking about a pilot, as in pilot project. Pilot in this context means a pilot project, not a pilot in the sky. Okay, medubar bepilot. We're talking or speaking about a pilot project. Sheba mizgalto. Sheba mizgalto has 1, 2, 3, 4 things going in it, simply around the word mizgeret. We've talked about the word mizgeret before. Framework. Framework mizgeret. It's also like what you put, a framework could be for a painting, a picture, but also a framework for a project or a pilot in this case. מדובר בפיילוט שבמסגרתו, שבמסגרת שלו, or מסגרתו, that, in מסגרת, מסגרתו, in its pilot, that we're talking about a pilot in its framework, or whose framework. So we can also translate this. תתאפשר. This is related to that verb we had just before, right? Le'afsher is to allow, will be allowed. Allow, this is to be allowed. Titafsher, what? What will be allowed? Knisa lalishkot gam lelo tor. Okay, very important, folks, that the pilot project in its framework will allow, as we heard from the headline and the subheadline, will allow the entry into the offices, knisa lalishkot, knisa, entry, lishkot, offices, gam lelo tor, without an appointment. It has been known since Corona that you cannot just walk into the Interior Ministry for a passport document without an appointment in advance. Now they're saying because of the crisis in issuing passports, they're going to allow people to enter Misad HaPnim without an appointment in advance and make one on the spot, right? You'll still need to queue up and get a number to get your spot in line. Avur hanpakat dalkonim. Carefully. Me 7:30 baboker מ-7:30 בבוקר ועד 10 בערב, בין 14 במאי ועד 15 ביוני. Okay, so it's going to allow you to go to one of the 4 big offices of the Interior Ministry in Israel, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa, Beersheba, without an appointment, and between the hours of 7:30 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, between the 14th of May to the 15th of June. That's a long time, folks. It has never been open that late. Anyone who's familiar with going to Misad Apnim in the past knows they usually have a hard cutoff of like 12:31 in the afternoon. Now we're hearing 7:30 to 10 o'clock at night. Understanding how big of a crisis it is to issue new passports and update existing ones. Okay, we're going to run out of time because I want to show you how to make an appointment. I'm saying all this for 2 important things. One, because this made the news today and it is also being reported in English, which is great. And I encourage you to read more about how it's going to work. We're going to go through how to set up an appointment anyways in a second. It's also important to know that because of the backlog in issuing new passports, that if you have a foreign passport and you are an Israeli citizen, you can use that foreign passport to exit and enter Israel through the end of 2023. They've already made that deal. So anyone who made Aliyah still has their country of origins passport, American, Canadian, British, so forth. And it's a valid passport, can enter and leave Israel on that passport, no problem. Right? In Israel, just like other countries, you need to exit and leave normally with that country's passport if you hold it. In this case, because of the severe backlog, you're able to use your other passport if it's valid. This will also help a lot of people from countries who will also have lots of backlogs in updating their other passports. Okay, so you only have to use one. If another one, you can use a foreign passport if it's valid, if your Israeli passport is invalid. But as you're seeing here, for 1 month, the offices in the 4 biggest cities, and you don't need to live in those 4 cities to get an appointment in them. You can just go to them or pick it in advance, and I'll show you how to do that in a second, from 7:30 in the morning to 10 at night. It's a really big deal, folks. Please read more details about it. But I'm going to show you, before we get to questions, I'm just going to show you how you're actually going to make an appointment if you've never done this before, or you've forgotten, or you've chosen to forget because it is not always the most pleasant of experiences dealing with Misad Apnim and other government offices. Okay, so in Israel, if you are based in Israel, you're going to go to myvisit.com. If you're on a computer, they also have an app. The app interface looks exactly the same. And yes, it does include English to a certain extent, and you're going to see where that extent is. I'm going to even start in English just so you can see what that extent is. So first off, I want to refresh this. As you see here, it says sign in or continue without an account, right? I have the option here to set up an account. I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to show you continue without an account. Okay, I'm going to type in the CAPTCHA security lock here, CBSUR9, and look what it says here. And again, this is English, so it's easier to follow. They also have other languages enabled for this first part. It says here, without an account, you can schedule appointments, but you cannot view or cancel your appointments after you close the browser, right? If I signed up, I could get access to existing past appointments and change them or cancel. I'm just going to schedule an appointment. That's all I'm going to take you through today with the little time we have left. Yes, continue anyway. MyVisit.com, folks, is a really important website and app because it's not just for Misrad Apnim. This is what we've been talking about, Reshut HaOchlusin VaHagira, the Population and Immigration Authority. But this is also connected if you need to schedule an appointment with Bituach Leumi, National Insurance, Chevrat HaChashmal, the Nationwide Electrical Company, Dual Yisrael, the Israeli Postal Company, if you need to schedule an appointment to pick up a package, any other government ministries that you would ever need to meet with, but also let's see if that's here, but also municipalities. If you live in Haifa or Hulon or Bat Yam or Rishon or any of the other municipalities listed here, and you need to schedule an appointment for all sorts of things. You need to pay a debt, you need to pay your Alnona, you need to set up parking, whatever it may be. MyVisit.com is the one-stop shop. It's a really important tool that we use. I'm just going to take you to Reshut HaOchlusin to show you what you're going to do. You're going to click on that, and what does it say? Let's get some information. You're going to type in your Teudat Zehut. I'm not going to do that today. You don't need to know what my Teudat Zehut number is. And then it's going to say, what would you like to do? And you're going to pick, I believe it's called Dalkonim or Shirutei Dalkon or Shirutei Teudot, the document services that you need. And then find a location. Up till now, right? Up till now, you had to pick an office anywhere in the country that had any feasible opening. Most of them are booked solid for months in advance. With what we just went through in the news, you can not only show up to the 4 biggest ones during that time period without an appointment, you can pick one of those 4 and make an appointment in advance. So even better scheduling your time accordingly. And then you're going to choose a service, either issuing or renewing a passport. Okay, very simple to use myvisit.com, specifically for passports, but all sorts of other issues. Okay, we're running out of time fast. I apologize, so I want to get to some Q&A before it is too late. All right. Why do some people say Tel Aviv? It's a great question. That is a particularly British affectation to say Tel Aviv. You also hear some people with a more Ashkenazi Hebrew background saying Tel Aviv. In modern Hebrew, it's Tel Aviv, right? The Yud indicates it's a long vowel. That's just what it is. We have accents in this country, and we're going to talk more about accents and spelling in an upcoming lesson. But in modern Hebrew, the standardized pronunciation of the city of Tel Aviv is Tel Aviv. The official name is Tel Aviv Yafo. Accents are to your own. We love accents as fellow Olim, right? Okay. How will this issuance of passports affect how long it will take to get? We applied for a passport after Pesach. So if we kept reading the article, and unfortunately we don't have enough time for it, they also talk about that they're going to, in addition, open up all these other queues, appointments to make passports. They're also going to create automated machines to issue biometric passports on the spot. Those of you who've gotten a passport in the last several years, you know that everything is now done in the office. You no longer need to bring a passport photo from outside the office into it. They take your photo there, they do all the documentation. It's very fast once you get the appointment, but getting the appointment has been next to you, if not impossible lately. Once you're in and it's done, it's a very quick process. But in addition to that already quick process with a person, they're going to have automated machines. So I encourage you to read the article, and we'll send you the link in Hebrew as well as in English what's being planned, but there will be automated passport machines that will also issue passports much faster than currently done. Okay. Biometric passports usually indicate with a fingerprint. You'll speak to them more specifically about that. I can't speak to the other biometric factors that are added to it. Misrad HaPnim, when you go for the passport, will let you know, as well as on their website. They give you more of the details. The cost of the passport, also, you can go to the website. It's piba.gov.il. We'll send you that link as well to see all the costs that are related to getting a passport. If I have an appointment in August and will be traveling on an expired passport using my US passport, should I try to do this? Diane, thanks for asking. It's a little convoluted how you asked, and I'm also not an expert on this. I'm just translating the article. I'd suggest being in touch directly with Nefesh B'Nefesh about your questions. They're a great resource for this. When is the end of the year? Is it Rosh Hashanah or the secular New Year 2023? Great question. A much longer topic to discuss, folks. In Israel, we use both the Jewish and Gregorian calendars. Okay, both calendars are used. And as such, certain things begin and end on the Jewish New Year, and certain things begin and end on the secular Gregorian New Year. Whole other conversation to have, but just know that the Knesset has seasonal sessions. This one happened to begin on the 1st of May. Okay, that's going to change based on when the holidays are. This is not about the 1st of May. This is the fact that it's after Pesach and Yemei HaShoah, HaZikaron, and Yom Ha'atzmaut. Okay, that's what it's referring to, having the summer session. Okay, someone is telling me about the MyVisit was broken. Again, folks, this is a brand new pilot program. We use that word pilot for a reason. They've changed the entire thing. It's going to be rolled out in the next few days. You see it starts on the 14th of May. If you have questions about this, please look into both the article, the news coverage of it. There's going to be updated information leading up to the 14th of May. This is what I'm just taking you through the news. Right? That's all I'm doing here. I'm not representing Misrad HaPnim. I'm just taking you through the news. I'm sure this portal is also going to be updated accordingly with those appointments. But just know this is brand new news as of today. How much in advance? When does one use u instead of vav to say and? Great question. We're going to talk about that in spelling and pronunciation, like I said, in a few days from now. Zoe, what is the reason for the passport crisis? Is it the fact that people did not renew their passports during Corona? So there's a backlog of expired passports. Exactly right, Zoe. What happened during Corona, like in a lot of countries around the world, and those of you, for example, who need to renew their passports through foreign embassies here in Israel, particularly Americans, because Israel has one of the largest American expat populations in the world. I believe it's the 4th or 5th largest, in fact. What happened during Corona? People weren't traveling. And as a result, a lot of people got laid off at the airport. A lot of security people got laid off. If you've traveled in the last several months, it's gotten better. But in the last year, the lines at Ben Gurion security have been increasingly longer because of fewer people who were furloughed and then had a harder time rehiring them or hiring new people. Same thing in government ministries, especially ones that interface directly with people like Misrad HaPnim. So Misrad HaPnim, full of clerks, no longer could they take in-person appointments. Many people were either furloughed or laid off. And as a result, a lot of in-person services were severely curtailed. There is a huge backlog of people trying to update their passports because either you couldn't or it wasn't relevant during Corona. And now with the surge of people looking to update their passports, they need to create some solution for this backlog. Because again, not all Israelis have a foreign passport. Many, in fact, don't. Right? They don't have either because they didn't make Aliyah themselves, or they're not eligible for patriation like some people are. So they only have an Israeli passport. If it's expired, they can't leave the country. They can't enter another country. So that's the reason why all of this is taken on the level of, as it said, the very first word in our article, mashbel. Great question. Margaret, can I find channel 12 on YouTube? You cannot. They do have some things that are listed on there. Channel 12 is known as Keshet, Kuf Shin Taf, like a rainbow. You can go to their website, which is mako.co.il. We'll send you that link as well, Margaret, and everyone else, directly to their website. It is free streaming in Israel. Outside of Israel, you'll probably have to use a VPN to block it, to unblock it rather. So very important there. Okay, some off-topic and sad to say inappropriate comments being made in the Q&A, but It's great to have 227 people on this call, folks. It's really exciting. All of you are interested in learning Hebrew. We're going to stop here for the night. If you have any further questions, please write us at hebrew@nbn.org.il. Next week is another class of Café Oleh. We're going to go back and do some more culture. We talked last week about Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Memorial and Independence Days. Next week, we're going to talk about another important cultural institution in Israel and learn Hebrew at the same time, and up your cultural literacy here in Israel. I'm going to leave it in suspense. If you know what happens next week, there's a bunch of things that happen. That'll be your clue, as we talked about current events today. So too, we're going to talk about current events next week, but in the context of both reading and understanding Hebrew, maybe even a little singing as well, although not in person, you don't want to hear me sing. So until then, until next Monday, 8 p.m., Toda Rabah. Thank you all so much for joining. You will receive a copy of this recording as well as the spreadsheet in the next day or so, and it will also be up on YouTube in the next few days. Toda Rabah, thank you all so much, and Leitrot, take care.